Mankind has, from the dawn of history, been drawn to many secret constructions for whose origin and often purpose there is no well-documented, verifiable information. And the size of these ancient structures is astonishing. After all, even today's builders and building engineers might often have had a problem creating them, even with the help of the most advanced modern techniques. How could our ancestors have possibly built these monuments with only the help of the simplest tools and machines? Modern archaeology has various theories regarding the origins of these ancient constructions, though these are not necessarily always plausible. Unless one can create an accurate copy of the building with the same weight and measurements using the technology that existed at the time, then one is left with nothing but unsubstantiated theories. It is no wonder that from time immemorial irrational theories have arisen that the constructions were the handiwork of some mystical or supernatural beings, or that the builders were even visitors from outer space. In contrast to this, experimental archaeology sets out to provide a rational explanation of the genesis of these ancient structures. There is no mystery surrounding this rocking stone. It ended up here when it was dislodged during the construction of the railway line above, connecting Prague with Bavaria in the 1860s. And we are here today on account of one person, Dr. Pavla Pavla, a man whose lifetime's interest has been experimental archaeology. He went on to set up a company specialising in moving very heavy objects, and now he's the leader of a group of local enthusiasts whose aim is to move this 40-ton stone back to its original resting place. An integral part of the realisation of these constructions is the transport of the giant stone monoliths to the site, or, as the case may be, the transport of the finished monuments to their final destination. The engineer Pavla Pavla is famous for persuading the great Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian explorer and populariser of science, to take note of his solution to one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of the world: how the giant Moai statues on Easter Island were moved from the tufa quarries to their locations. Imagine yourself in 1982. In Czechoslovakia, tough communism is in control. The normalization which followed the Prague Spring has been suppressed by the army of the Soviet Union and its satellites. Pavla Pavla, a newly qualified engineer who spends his time seeking out rational explanations for historical mysteries, develops a theory to explain the movement of the statues on Easter Island. He bases his theory on the legend that the statues walked, upright and erect, to their positions. His drawings are published in the magazine Science and Technology for the Young and taken from there by the French magazine Science et Vie. But the rest of the world is not prepared to take seriously what someone has thought up in communist Czechoslovakia. And so Pavl's only option is to convince the iconic experimental archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl of the validity of his theory by demonstration. He decides to test it out on a statue of the same size and weight. Heyerdahl, after some initial mistrust, accepts Pavl's theory, and in 1986 he invites him to try it out on Rapa Nui, where the Strakonice citizen teaches a real Moai statue to walk.
Tak tohle je ta socha, co jsme s Thorem Heyerdahlem stěhovali.
But Pavla Pavla did not stop at just one experiment. Already in 1983, he had organised the lifting and return to its original bed of the most famous rocking stone in the Czech Republic, the one in Kadov, from whence it had been removed in 1893. And that was just with the aid of simple tools. The stone weighed approximately 30 tons. A further experiment arose from Pavla Pavla's interest in both history and world mysteries, and at the same time physics and mechanics. He wondered how the former inhabitants of South America could have transported the many-tonned andesite blocks to the Tiwanaku structure from the Yungoyo quarry in Copacabana, when the route between them was lined with hills and swamps. The location of the stones, the so-called piedras calzadas, or tired stones, on the shores of Iwawi, indicates that the transport took place across the surface of Lake Titicaca. Of that, almost no expert is in doubt. Nevertheless, that raises another question. What might the boats have looked like that could bear such monoliths, and how could the Indians have loaded them? Pavla Pavla put forward his very particular solution, the theory which he called Archimedes' law, Indian style. The basis of this is the assumption that the Indians did not transport their burden on boats, but in the water, suspended between two small boats. A simple way to solve both the loading and unloading. During this experiment, Pavla Pavla worked with another great expert, the doctor of ethnography, Václav Scholz. Scholz had lived for many years with the Aymara Indian tribe on the shores of Lake Titicaca and had even become their chief. In consultation with Scholz and with the help of a group of friends, Pavla built exact replicas of two Indian boats. For the building materials, he used a particular type of reed which grows on the shores of Lake Titicaca. In June 1988, Pavla's trial itself was carried out. The experimental archaeologists from Strakonice celebrated yet another success. With his Indian boats, he succeeded in loading, transporting and unloading a stone weighing several tons across the Svět Lake in South Bohemia. In 1989, communism fell in Czechoslovakia. Pavla Pavla could at last travel freely across borders and visit the many places around the world to which he had been drawn since childhood. In the spring of 1991, he prepared a further experiment. He had decided that he would build a replica of one of the trilithons of Stonehenge in his native town of Strakonice. And as usual, he wanted to use only those tools that could have been available to the inhabitants of the British Isles more than 3,500 years ago.
In the case of Pavla Pavla, it isn't just a matter of thinking up new theories just for their own sake. Thanks to his many years of experience of shifting heavy burdens under very difficult conditions, he has been able to confirm in practice his theories about how to maneuver them. In this work, it is very important to be able to improvise. In the meeting of new non-standard problems, the development of new ways of moving forward is initiated. By new, and we're using new in inverted commas, we're talking about where the crane cannot go, the brain and bare hands using only the simplest of tools have to be called in. And hence his theories have come out of practical experience coupled with a familiarity of the laws of physics.
In respect of Stonehenge, Pavla Pavla studied all the published theories. All of them were feasible, but even the simplest needed the aid of giants. Two of the most common theories rest on the lintel being pulled up an embankment or being laid gradually with the aid of a box crib and stacking. In addition, Pavla investigated the possibilities available to the inhabitants of that time, their habits and what the countryside could offer them.
Člověk se od ostatních živočichů liší tím, že opakované postupy neustále vylepšuje. Podobně i tvůrci Stonehenge. Oni vytvořili překlady, které navzájem pospojovali drážkou a perem a navíc z každého sloupu nahoru trčí 2 kamenné čepy, do kterých překlady zapadají. Ta stavba drží 2000 let. Při odkrývání jednotlivých teorií se vždycky nejdřív zabývám technickou stránkou a potom, jak to vlastně vytvořit nejefektivněji, tak, aby to bylo nejlevnější, nejdostupnější. Když byli stavitelé Stonehenge tak dobrými řemeslníky a inženýry, museli být i vynikající manažeři.
Let us look at the problems that had to be solved by the old-time engineers in the case of Stonehenge, and how Pavla Pavla regarded them in the light of his previous experiments. The sandstone monoliths of the Stonehenge structure came from the quarry on Marlborough Downs, some 18 miles away. The so-called blue stones, which form the concentric circle around the mighty trilithons, the sarsens, can be proved to have come from the area of the Preseli Mountains in southwest Wales. Possible ways of transporting by road or by water had already been tried by Pavla in his previous experiments. The erection of columns, menhirs or megaliths is no mystery. There have been many successful attempts in the world. However, in the case of Stonehenge, the lintels are the hardest nut to crack. Although these are by far the lightest of the component parts, their positioning presents the greatest technical problem. They have to be dropped from above. So, in 1991, Pavla Pavla tested the whole process on a small model. The basis of the theory was to hoist the lintels on slanting logs and with the aid of simple levers lower them from above onto the tenons. The problem of the anticipated stretching of the rope was solved by Pavla Pavla through a lengthy immersion in water. It was possible to work out in theory how the lintel was placed through the use of the sloping logs. Whether this method would actually work, however, could of course only be confirmed by the trial itself. Once the lintel is placed in a horizontal position, Pavla's theory relies on the original model of lowering it using some kind of gallows. During the practical test, however, a simpler method evolved by supporting the lintel on an A-frame and gradually removing the sand piled up under this support.
Vytažení 7tunového překladu a usazení na kamenné čepy se nám nakonec ve Strakonicích podařilo v počtu 7 osob.
And did the engineers of times long past really seek out the most simple solution? If so, it was probably the one that Pavla Pavla tried out on the model in his native town in the centre of Europe.
It is 20 years since that experiment. For a person that is maybe a long time, but for history and for experimental archaeology it is but a scant moment.
Pavla Pavla has put a lot of effort into his experiments and has described them all in great detail in several books.
Isolated behind the Iron Curtain, his ideas were not at first able to conquer the world. Today, in a very different Europe, not only is the free movement of people guaranteed, but also of thoughts. And the Czech Heyerdahl, Pavla Pavla, wants to venture still further with solving the technical mysteries of ancient times with the help of experimental archaeology.